Hi, welcome back to the study of Esther. The last session we were talking about Esther 6, and we realized that the plan that Haman had to kill Mordecai, he had set up a pole right near his own home, and he was going to impale Mordecai on the pole and kill him. And when he went to talk to the king about it the next morning, the king had had a sleepless night, and he had read some of the annals of history and realized that Mordecai had saved his life and he had never honored him. So he turns the tables on Haman's plan without realizing that Haman wanted to kill Mordecai. He tells Haman to be the one to lead Mordecai around on a royal horse, dressed in royal robes, and shouting out all the time, this is the way the king honors someone. And so instead of being killed on the pole that Haman imagined Mordecai on, instead of that, he's lifted up on a royal horse and sent in a triumphal procession. God lifted up the lowly and put him high on a horse and gave him honor. It's so typical of the way God works. And what I was thinking about this today, I was kind of reviewing it a little bit and thinking, and I thought, there is a verse in the Bible that says we too are in a triumphal procession of God's making. It comes from 2 Corinthians 2, verses 14 to 16, and here's what it says. But thank God, he has made us his captives and continues to lead us along in Christ's triumphal procession. Now he uses us to spread the knowledge of Christ everywhere like a sweet perfume. Our lives are a Christ-like fragrance rising up to God, but this fragrance is perceived differently by those who are being saved and by those who are perishing. To those who are perishing, we are a dreadful smell of death and doom, but to those who are being saved, we are a life-giving perfume. I love that image of us as believers being a beautiful fragrance rising to God. And as people see our lives or hear our prayers or understand where we're coming from, they are drawn to Christ by the beauty and fragrance of that kind of an aroma, of that kind of a life. It's such a beautiful image. Reminds me of the incense that some churches burn in a service of God. And the incense symbolizes our lives and our prayers being a fragrance, going up to God, rising up to him, and being acceptable in his sight through Jesus. We don't get on the triumphal procession by ourselves. We are only there because of Christ. And so it's his procession that we're in, but he leads us along and gives us honor in the procession, and our fragrance brings glory to him. It's such a great image, and it's another picture of how God raises the humble to a place of honor and privilege in his kingdom. And it's what he did with Mordecai. And think of Mordecai being a Jew going around the town, being honored by the king. That also must have said to the people, hey, this guy believes in the one true God. He's a Jew and he's being honored. This is what happens when you're a Jew. I think everything we do gives a message to other people about what it's like to be a believer. And this kind of honor, the God-given glory, it brings so much glory to God because it's not of our making. It's not of our doing. God lifts up the humble. And so Haman's plan did not succeed. And quite the contrary, it is going to backfire on him big time. And there's a great verse in Proverbs that prepares us for this because it's so true in life. It says, Proverbs 21:30-31, there is no wisdom, no insight, no plan that can succeed against the Lord. The horse is made ready for the day of battle, but victory rests with the Lord. So there's no wisdom, no insight, no plan that Haman can make that's going to succeed against the Lord. And he has erected this pole. The horse is made ready for battle. You know, he's got it all set that Mordecai is going to die. And then the tables are turned. And watch what happens when Queen Esther can finally talk to the king about Haman's bigger plan, not just the plan to kill Mordecai, but the plan to kill all of the Jews. So let's look at Esther 7. And here's what it says about that banquet that they were both invited to. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king, second day, this was a long banquet, 2 days. A lot of drinking, I think, which would have been typical probably in that culture. So on the second day, the king asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Then King Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. That is my petition. And spare my people. That is my request. So she's saying to him, I don't want half the kingdom. I don't want material goods. I'm telling you what I want. I want to live. I'm scheduled to die. My people are all scheduled to die. This is going to be news to the king because remember, he didn't actually remember probably making this edict, and he had given his signet ring to Haman so that Haman could go ahead and make the plans all by himself. So, and he had the king's authority to do that, but the king might not have been aware of the exact nature of the edict and what date it had been and how it had been proclaimed to everywhere, all over the provinces. So he's a little surprised by this, and he goes, what do you mean you're going to die? What do you mean your people are going to die? So she goes on and further explains it, continuing in Esther 7. The queen continues, for I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. So here she's saying, you know what? My whole people are scheduled to be killed. My entire race, all of the Jews. And you know, if you were just going to sell us into slavery or something, I wouldn't have said too much because, you know, hey, we're captives. But killing all of us? I don't want to die. I don't want my people to die. So King Xerxes is suddenly aware of this whole plot to annihilate the Jewish nation. And he gets pretty mad. So now we're in verse 5. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he? This man who has dared to do such a thing. And now we can just picture Esther pointing her finger, turning around and pointing right at Haman. And Esther said, an adversary and an enemy, this vile Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage. He left his wine and went out into the palace garden. I think the king is so distraught here, he does not even know what to do. Here's his most trusted advisor that has made arrangements to kill his queen that he loves and all of her people. He is so mad, he gets up and leaves the room. He's going to go walk around in the garden. He doesn't even know what to say. He's so mad. Well, Haman, of course, is going to realize that he has made a big judgment and error. So now we're in verse 7. But Haman, realizing the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. So now the tide has turned. The pride have fallen low, and the low have been raised up to their honor. Think about this. She's probably reclining on a couch, and he's down on his knees begging her. This is what the king sees then when he returns. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. We can imagine what he's thinking is happening here. And the king exclaimed, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? And soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. I'm guessing they put some kind of a cloth over the top of him. The servants must have, or the soldiers who were there. They covered up his face because they know he's going to be executed. But watch what is interesting about how he's executed is another coincidence. There just happens to be a servant there who happens to know what Mordecai's been doing with this pole. So then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands right by Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." And the king said, "Impale him on it." So they impaled Haman on the pole that he had set up for Mordecai. And then the king's fury subsided. We understand here that, in a way, in a big way, Haman was hoisted on his own petard. If you've ever heard that expression, hoisted on your own petard, or what goes around comes around. He planned something that he thought was going to turn out one way, and it backfired. So often this is true of our lives as well, isn't it? When we plan something that's not right, according to Proverbs, it's going to backfire. And let me read it to you. Proverbs 26:27. "If you set a trap for others, you will get caught in it yourself. If you roll a boulder down on others, it will crush you instead." I find that to be very, very true about our lives, that when we're not willing to let God work on our behalf, when we want to go out and take the revenge, or in my life, when I've been unforgiving or have not wanted to give in to somebody that is trying to push me, in a way that I think I want my way. Whenever I'm full of revenge or hate or unforgiveness, and I don't give that to the Lord, I act on it, then that will come back usually to hurt me a whole lot more than it hurt the person it was intended to hurt. That kind of revenge or unforgiveness or hate that we hold inside, it really poisons our own soul and kills our soul instead of killing the person that we hate or are angry with. Instead of hurting them, it hurts us. I find that to be very, very true in my life. And that's what this proverb is telling us. If you set a trap for others, a lot of times it's going to spring back and hurt you. It's going to come back and get you. And that's what happened to Haman. He set a trap for Mordecai, and it came back, and he was impaled upon the very pole that he wanted to use to kill Mordecai. So I don't know. I think to Mordecai it must have looked originally like he was done for, because he had to have heard about the pole that was set up. And yet God turned it around and made it about him. And all he had to do really was wait. So often, instead of taking revenge or being unforgiving or hating somebody or gossiping about them, what we really need to do is pray about that and wait. And wait. You wait on the Lord. It reminds me of my very, very favorite verse. I would call it more my life verse than any other verse in the Bible. And it's a verse that I repeated over and over to myself, almost as a prayer, when I was going through a really tough time. And this is Psalm 27:13-14. "I am still confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord." I love that verse because it gives me confidence that I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. I don't have to wait till heaven to be happy. God is going to show me happiness. God's going to bring loveliness to my life if all I have to do is wait on his timing. And not just sit around, waiting. No, that's not what it says. It says, be strong, take heart, and wait for the Lord. And that is what Mordecai would have had to do when he gave his information to Esther, is simply fast, pray, wait. Wait on the Lord, but be strong waiting, knowing God will do something. That's pretty exciting waiting. It's not just ho hum, I'm sitting back waiting. It's waiting in strength, in the strength of the Lord and in the strength of your prayers. So the end of this chapter, then, we see that Haman is gone, but this is not the end of the story, because the edict that the king proclaimed is the law of the Persians and Medes, and in that time that law was irrevocable. So even though Haman is now gone, the instigator of this thing, it doesn't matter. The law still stands. The Jews are still in trouble. They're still going to be executed or annihilated on that day, so many months in advance. So there's more to the story about how God works this out to save his people, but I am still confident of this. They will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. And I hope you see that goodness today as you wait for the Lord. Have a blessed day.